in the spirit of contributing. One is, it would be really an amazing sort of touristic or interest raising effort if you created a competition, an architectural competition, so that you could lay out what some of the guiding principles were and then invite some of the youngest and brightest architects from all over the world to consider what could go here. That doesn't have to be traditional, because this is not really traditional. This is what was put in the 60s and 70s, but this is not old Kingston. I mean, what you did with this building is beautiful. That doesn't kind of reflect where old architecture really was. So one idea is just to bring in something completely new but spectacular, and you can do that almost for no money. If it's a competition, you get the best and brightest ideas, and I bet you could get that funded in some way. Second idea is, or concept is, as part of the guiding principles, I can't imagine that the best use of waterfront is a garage. I just feel like if you're going to,
on the waterfront.
well, but you're putting, but whatever that 100 feet, I don't know what I wasn't in that other discussion a month ago, but if there's parking in that building that's on the waterfront, it feels like a waste of space.
No, you're absolutely correct. Let me see if I can point to this without blocking it out.
It's across the street.
Right here. Okay?
It's across the street. It's not a waterfront.
It's on the other side of the Strand. It's a 4-acre plot. It has nothing to do with waterfront. Waterfront is sacred.
Okay, fine.
Right? Waterfront is a gift from the conceptual gods. And we don't want to use it for parking.
Just a
All right,
comment. The
in
water.
here, you can't tell I couldn't tell from this picture, I couldn't see any plans really. So
Just for background, the waterfront itself, the rundown, are zoned for what are called water-dependent uses. Other uses that help support a water-dependent use. So you have mixed uses on the site.
Sorry,
Are
could you
treated-
say what you mean by that, by water?
Water-dependent.
Yes.
It's a use that requires a location in, on, above,
Can you
or
give us
immediately adjacent to the water in order to
an
function.
example of
exist.
what that would be? Because I'm
Marinas.
missing something here. Pardon?
Marinas, boatyards.
But whatever did all the talk about recreating some marsh area to ameliorate the flooding issues?
That's not really a water-dependent use. We can answer that if
Yeah.
you want to, but I'd like to focus on what water dependency is first. So in 1992, the city developed a local waterfront revitalization program that contained many plans in it. This 2002 plan is a refinement of that. As part of that effort, when the city went through the comprehensive planning process, it was decided that the entire waterfront needed to be rezoned for water-dependent uses, and that's what they did. So that's the primary objective here, which is to place and get water-dependent uses here along the roundabout with other uses that would support it. You can't do that without the infrastructure there that will support those uses. So a dredge spectral navigation channel already exists. We have a failing bulkhead. That has to be repaired or replaced in order then to support the uses that come later on. I don't know if you want to go anywhere.
Well, one thing is that down at the very end, which would be on the right-hand side, that area is designated.
Right over here on the right side.
Is designated to have a natural shoreline, and there's been some discussions about putting in an eco hotel with kayak launchings and things like that. And then once you get beyond this area, you get into that whole area behind North Street, which is all natural shoreline, going all the way out to what used to be the park down at the point there. And going upstream on the Rondout, on both sides, both the Kingston side and on the other side, most of it is natural shoreline. In the area that we're talking about, which is the focus of the local waterfront implementation plan, is really only a 3/4 of a mile section out of a shoreline on the Rondout Creek, which is many miles long. Who's next?
Obviously, there are a lot of issues here. And it seems that, the issue of how to develop
the whole waterfront is one, and this specific building is another. I happen to have a house on Tompkins Street which borders your 4-acre property, and I'm sure there are other people here who are residential residents of the area as well. And it seems that your vision is a little bit more towards the industrial development, or, you know, a parking garage or a marina or a boat shop or whatever. But as residents, you know, we came here for the quiet enjoyment of our property, and this is like a whole new idea that sort of has been thrust upon us. So, and that's one thing, and the other thing is that I know your renderings are sort of in process, but you know, waterfront properties often have a sort of historical basis. And I agree with this woman that this is something from the 50s or 60s, with all due respect to the architect. And you know, we could look at something like Dumbo or the South Street Seaport or the Long Wharf in Boston and see how some of these, you know, older brick buildings sort of really do, you know, take the 19th century and keep it alive, you know, which is, I think, wonderful. I would hate to see something that's 50s or 60s or 70s, you know, mid-century. And I think it's important to both keep, you know, these things in mind when having a vision, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's important to have a vision, and also to keep in mind what is around. And what is around are residents, people who enjoy the quiet of their home, who want, you know, like, who came here because of the waterfront, the quiet of the waterfront. I mean, I didn't sign up for, you know, big marinas with huge cruise ships coming up the Hudson. You know, I mean, this is not, you know, something that, you know, I came here for.
To a very large extent, I agree with you. I certainly love 19th century architecture. My house in Brooklyn was built in 1820. The house next door to it was built in 1821. The house that I live in up here was built around 1870. Most of the real estate that I've owned in my life in various places is 19th century real estate. This building was probably built in the early 20th century, but it's certainly a 19th century design. I love old buildings.
Okay,
I
well,
love
that's a good
old-
thing to keep in mind. Because, you know, I just happened to see the DVD Lost Roundout, which is about the urban renewal in the 60s. And like the person said on your tape, demolish it and start over. It was a disaster.
No, it is.
And that is not a vision, and that's not a model to keep in mind.
I absolutely agree with that, and you know, part of my personal history has been to rescue properties that were in danger of being demolished or modified to the point where they weren't recognizable. One of the best-known properties that I rescued was Eleanor Roosevelt's childhood home up in Tivoli, right on the border of Germantown, which is a 4,700 square foot property that we acquired almost by accident about 12 or 14 years ago. And it was slated to be demolished by a developer who was going to just use the land for, you know, some other purposes. And we were able to acquire the property, and we stabilized the building. And we spent 8 or 9 years finding just the right person to buy the building to restore it. And it's under restoration now as an original property. It'll be open to the public when it's done. I'm very proud of that. But we've done other things like that in downtown Brooklyn, where there were properties that were derelict or semi-derelict, and we brought them back and we basically restored them and made them usable by, you know, modern standards, but without changing the look of the building. And I'd also like to respond to your comment about this isn't what we signed up for. Well, there's a history on the Rondout Creek, and the history is a couple of 100 years old. And it is for most of its life, it was a vibrant waterfront. People earned their living here, they raised their families here, they had jobs here, water-dependent uses all along, and the real to some extent, ended when that portion of the economy was phased out or it failed. And so what we're talking about doing here, hopefully, if it happens, is to kind of reach back into our history and use the waterfront for water-dependent uses. Waterfront is this sacred area, and to, just have it as a walkway with no other use to it doesn't do anything much for the city, or for the economy, or for us culturally, or for any of the other uses that we would put the waterfront to. And a lot of people came along long before I did who worked up the planning that involved this, which is 3 decades old. The objective, and it was well vetted with the population, was to revitalize the waterfront in ways that would benefit all of us. And
Well, we obviously appreciate the fact that we're being included in, the process of what
Absolutely.
you're doing. And obviously, everybody, I'm sure, appreciates it. But the point is that, visions can differ. And
Sure.
you could have a much larger, more active kind of vision than I do when I walk my dog quietly along the waterfront.
I walk my dogs quietly along the waterfront now. One of them died, I still walk the other one.
But you're
Her
not
name
going
is
to be
Magnolia
living,
Iannucci.
you're not going to be living right catty corner to a 4-acre building, which suddenly is going to appear in our front door.
Actually, my house in Kingston is right next to Feeney's tugboat yard where they manufacture barges. And when I was a little boy, I had a book and a 78 record of Little Toot and Big Toot that talked all about tugboats, and I grew up loving tugboats, and I love watching Feeney's tugboats next to me.
In the back.
Hi.
I got to you first and you next, okay?
Okay. Me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, you.
So, my dog's name is Lula, and we walk her along the Rondell all the time. I'm worried about sea level rise. I've been looking at the interactive maps about how much the creek is going to rise, and at best it's going to be 3 feet, at most 6 feet or more by 2050, which means that if your building is on stilts, your building will be fine, but the rest of the waterfront will be underwater. And so I'm wondering, what are you doing, what's the city doing in a visionary way to combat climate change, to address sea level rise, to talk about the environment? I appreciate that you are trying to create a vision for Kingston, but I'm not hearing what the vision is for the future of the climate and the water in our area.
With all due respect, it's a much bigger problem that we're going to solve here or in the city of Kingston. All we can do is what we can do.
What are you going to do?
And what we can do here is to have our designs reflect maximum vision in terms of coping with sea level rise. But at the same time, I don't think that there is total certainty as to how much it's going to rise and when it's going to rise. There are geopolitical forces which are at work on a worldwide basis now, and we don't know how that's going to play out. If some of the people who are in charge now have their vision, it's going to be a freaking disaster. But hopefully, what's happening on a worldwide basis now is that, there's a wake-up call, and we're realizing that all the bullshit that we've been fed over the last half a century about, it's not a real big problem, and it's coming home to roost now, and maybe the pendulum will swing back in the other direction. So I don't think there's a lot of certainty. And in the meantime, all we can do is what we can do to cope with secure bulkheads, intelligent architecture and designs and so forth.
What about like energy and things like that? Like how's the power going to be in this complex?
There's going to be a lot of roof area there. And, roof area to me is an invitation for solar panels. There are other ways that you can conserve energy. there's a lot that can be done as far as heating and cooling by running underground pipes and using the temperature of the subsurface soil. The whole waterfront development plan is sensitive to these things. Have I answered your question?
I think so. I'd like more details of how, like, what
I wish I
is
had more
involved
I really
in the
wish I-
vision of this. Like, if it is really this visionary architecture for Kingston, which I hope it is, like, what's the details there? Like, how are you going to make an impact on an environmental way for our city?
I don't know if I have an answer to your question. I mean, it's probably beyond my expertise, except to say that I understand these things and I appreciate these things, and smarter people than me are going to be coming involved in the detailed designs. And one of them might be you.
So it's really great that you are holding this presentation for us and answering our questions and listening to some feedback. And you said that this is the very beginning of the development. How are you going to, and I also want to point out, you've had the property for 15 years and you've collected a huge mass of land. You are very much have the future of, a large part of the future of the Rondout in your hands. Nothing that the public has been able to use has happened in that time, and now it's about to happen. What are the plans in terms of involving the public to hear feedback? Are you going to do any design charrettes, any feedback sessions? Are you going to hire any facilitators for that? Also, we do have some pretty valuable commissions. We've got a Conservation Advisory Commission, and we've got a Heritage Area Commission. Will you be waiting to go to them after the design is finished or along the way? And then lastly, Tompkins Street is all one side of the street, single little family-sized houses. How will you be making this building fit? What will the design be like for that street in the end? How will you make it fit there? How will you make the side of this project mirror the other side of the street so it's pleasant for people to walk down the street still? And what will you be doing with the Newark Lime and Cement Company building?
The corner white building?
Yeah, the corner of Tompkins and East End.
Well, let me respond to your last 2 points first. The 4-acre site has quite a slope to it, but I don't think that the building is going to be built on a slope. I think there will probably be a lot of excavation that takes place there, so that as the building progresses away from the road, it's going to be lower. And when you get to the far end of the building, if the entire building is ultimately built, the roof of the building would probably be level with Tompkins Street at the top. So there wouldn't be that much of the sides of the building that would be exposed, because you would excavate so you have a level floor of the building.
But the first block will be, if it's the same size as the front, will be quite large in comparison to the buildings across the street on Tompkins near East Strand. Are you going to do anything?
No,
Yeah?
because we're talking about a 3-story building. This is a 3-story building.
And I believe they're mainly 2-story buildings with peaked roofs as the 3rd story. Am I correct in assessing that? And they're quite small in bulk. So it's a very different feeling than a large block.
That might be true.
Yeah, so I hope that you'll be presenting different designs, elevations before you finish it, just to work with the public, is what I was talking about with that.
Absolutely.
And how will you be working with the public?
Well, we're doing it here today, aren't we? I mean, this is a step in the right direction, and certainly there's going to be more public meetings, and I think that maybe we do have to have maybe some commissions. Is Ann Loading here tonight? Oh, there you are.
I know, but I'm nervous to be quiet, right?
Well,
So I'll just jump in and help you out. I'll go up front so you don't have to turn around. My name is Ann Loading. I live on the 49 Tompkins, on the corner of Tompkins and East Union. And although I know Rob and I count him sort of as a friend, I don't have any other affiliation with them. So I've been in the neighborhood, it feels like forever, but I was involved starting in the 90s with the LWRP, with pretty much every waterfront plan since then. So in answer to a lot of the questions somebody was asking about, we were asking about the environmental stuff down here. There's a sea level rise task force study that was done. And that was, I mean, a lot of the things that Rob is using as parameters have been developed over the years with community input. And I will say, quite frankly, that when we started the LWRP, sea level rise wasn't a thing, like we didn't know about it. And I mean, there's faults in some of the plans because we're like people like you who sat through hundreds of hours of meetings, had consultants, some which were great, some not so much. But all those plans, pretty much all those plans are available now online or certainly through the city. So a lot of what they're looking at in their planning is based on plans and recommendations put together with citizens just like us. And when you read them, bear in mind that we're a lot more educated than we were then. I've also been through a lot of, worked very hard on fighting some of the crazy development stuff that was proposed for the Hudson River site, the old cement site up there. And I will say that this is a really rare opportunity. Usually we're pulled in so much later than this that you are in a position to fight. And I mean, I can feel, his building is going to be right across the street from my house. And when I heard about it, I was like, oh my God, the quiet, it's all going and stuff. So I totally have that feeling and I can feel it in the neighborhood. And I would say that, let's take this opportunity to get in so early and actually work with the developer to try to mitigate that and make sure that we're communicating it from the very beginning. Not that it's going to be a mystery to him. I mean, we all understand that we sort of live in this magic little pocket up there that people don't really go up there. I mean, it's us, right? And a few people who walk, and you can always tell in busy summertime when more cars are going through and you can see all the Brooklynites looking around like, wow, this is a nice neighborhood, right? We're like, we're already here, huh? So I would say to Rob, let's set up a formal way for us to sit down, periodically through your design process and talk about, like, if you have an idea for, like, for me, my instant thing is like, okay, where are the cars going to come in, right? Like, I'm not fundamentally opposed to the idea of parking, using that site for parking, because otherwise it's going to be parking on the street. You know how it is during the festivals and stuff down here. Well, do we want that every single weekend? I don't. Especially because nobody understands that you can't get through on the end of East Union, so they're all go zooming up to get around the traffic down here, and then it's a dead end, and they have to like turn around and zoom back because now they're mad that nobody told them that they couldn't get out. It's this thing. So he's not going to necessarily know about that, but if we start early on saying, well, actually, if you try to bring the traffic in, on the East Union end side, this is what you're going to run into. There's no way for him to know that, but we know it because we live it, right? We know where the problems are, where the flooding is and all that kind of stuff. So my ask to you would be to set up some sort of periodic and regular check-in with the neighborhood. Maybe a little bit more structured than this. Maybe where there's plans sitting out, the typical charrette thing where the plans are out and stuff like that. And then my ask would be for us, all of the people in the neighborhood, to actually familiarize yourself with the Sea Level Rise Task Force report, which is dry and rather inconclusive, actually, because even in that process, we couldn't come up with exactly what the best bulkhead is. Somebody was asking about the softened shoreline and habitat, and that was like a lot of discussion. So you should read that report because there are places in there where it says that it's actually appropriate and not appropriate for other places, because remember, we have a hillside which is also draining water down. So there was a lot of complexity in that, and as I said, it's inconclusive. The Heritage Area Commission report is sort of dated, but there's stuff easily going back to the 90s. So I think that it would help the process if we came in educated, and as long as they're keeping an open mind, I think we can actually figure out some way to use that property. Eventually, something's going to get built there, and we have a chance to keep it from being really stupid. Is the way I look at it. So that's it. Yeah.
There was a more specific plan after the resiliency plan and the local water revitalization plan called the tidal round out watershed plan. I don't know what the status of it is, whether it's officially accepted or what it was, but they went into the actual zoning of each individual parcel on the waterfront.
I mean, that's the thing, you're looking at, there's local plans that are sort of city-sponsored, the LWRP, stuff like that. And then there are state plans, and then there's actually even also what's called a harbor, Rondon Harbor Management, which is like the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of stuff out there, so kind of like, it's really gonna take a couple of months, I think, for those of you who haven't been involved sort of to other projects, to sort of get all that information in there. And sometimes it's complementary, but sometimes it's actually, they're saying opposite things at the same time.
There's a great interactive map where you can plug in the year, the
Yep.
level, sea level rise, and see
Yep.
where the water comes up into the rock.
Yeah, we're using, for the 100-year flood, we're using 60 inches. So,
And
Are these from you?
I'd like to respond to one of the things that you said, and I think it's a great idea to put together something with a little bit more structure to it in terms of keeping track of these things. You guys know my approach is here, and I think I'm doing the best that I can to make this something that is really good for the whole community. And if you would like to put together some kind of a committee
I knew you
here,
were going to do that. So I was like, yours.
and the minute you walked up from the back, you were dead.
No, I know.
And so I'd like to see something like that happen. Again, there's not a lot of detail here. We're talking about concepts now. We're talking about creating a framework along the East Strand so that the East Strand can be developed in a way that's healthy for the community. And we really do need that help. I mean, right now there are 36 or 37 houses in the city of Kingston that were forfeited for taxes. Families are out of those buildings. They're somewhere else. If you're talking about 35, you're talking over 100 people who are in the houses that maybe they were raised in because they can't afford the taxes, and the city's rebuilding them now. But we are the second lowest per capita income or family income in the county of Ulster. We have a lot of potential that we haven't realized. We've got a lot of smart people in Kingston. When I first came to Kingston, one of the things that I was impressed with was that just the average person that I met on the street or in the restaurant seemed to be very well informed. And, people you can have nice, intelligent conversations with. It's a really good population here. And I'm not being patronizing when I say this. It really is true. If you just look to your right and look to your left in this room, you guys are, the fabric of Kingston. And but we need to do better. We have a lot of potential that, the trajectory has already been established. We have a long way to go, and we have a lot of really good potential. I'm honored to be able to be a part of this. For things that I never even planned in my life, I'm able to have this kind of leverage, and I see it as leverage to do good. And what we're talking about here today, I think, is just a good step now that we can see some light at the end of the tunnel with regard to the rebuilding of the bulkheads and a few other things which will make all sorts of other things possible. And so I want to involve myself in the community in an outreach basis. I'd certainly like to see things happen. There's a lady over there with behind you with some good ideas. And
I have another two.
we want to get out of here sometime tonight, but you and Ann should probably be conspiring. And I also want to turn this question over to Steve Ressler on the issue of the local waterfront development plan.
Or sea level rise.
Sea level rise.
The original LWRP, which is a program that contains plans in it, does in fact address sea level rise. It was required to do that from 1972 legislation at the federal level, and then 1982 legislation they enacted. When you look through that program, you look at all those policies in it, 44 policies and refinements of them to reflect the circumstances in Kingston. If you were to apply those policies and what they're intended to do, you do address the need to retreat from certain areas, and where you can't retreat, especially in a highly urbanized area, to provide the appropriate design and flood-proofing standards so that certain types of uses can remain there. That in part is why the waterfront here was zoned for water-dependent uses, because they have to be in a floodplain. The other areas, as you move further west or toward the river, are areas where intense uses, other than letting it remain as essentially open space and wetlands, are areas that should remain that way, or where you then have an opportunity to provide some means of handling some of the flooding that comes from the more urbanized area. In the more urbanized areas, you also have to design the area so it can now take floodwaters and treat them appropriately, both absorb them, move them out of the way, and then treat to deal with water quality issues. So your program already does address that stuff on a broad scale. Now, the task is to get down to the nitty-gritty design work to achieve what those policies tell you you're supposed to be doing. So that's really the point I want to make, is that your program does in fact address sea level rise and flood and erosion hazards.
And there's somebody back there who has comments to call. That's you. That's you.
I may not have this correct, but the way I'm hearing it is you can't do anything without the bulkheads, right?
Pretty much true.
And who's paying for the bulkheads?
That's government.
So you're getting government money to pay for the bulkheads,
Yeah.
okay? And that's not in place yet, but that's coming. How much are they going to cost roughly?
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Silly
that-
money.
So, and then are you getting any pilot grant stuff from the city as well? Is that part of your plan? Any grants from the city? I mean, you guys have tax
I
rebates?
have no pending grant application with the city.
So what I'm concerned about, so you're getting government money to do this. What are you going to give back to the community? We have a shortage of affordable housing. You know, I mean, I hear you talk about Dumbo, but I live down there, and I can tell you right now, Dumbo is not where people like me can live anymore. So I have some concerns, having lived in one gentrifying community after another throughout my life, that this will become a place where it doesn't reflect the community that we live in. You know, and I'm a real estate agent. I'm all into like sell them for more than you bought them for, but only if you don't destroy the community. And my clients who come up here from New York City, they come up here because they're looking for something authentic, some authenticity. You know, and I love that you did the historical thing. That's great. I love the history of Kingston. But whatever you bring them has got to feel like something they're not getting somewhere else. And you know, I mean, that could be anywhere. You had mentioned Mystic, Connecticut, but you know that was 70 houses that were historically reconstructed that cost a fortune. So I'm just interested in how the money is going to be moved around and how it's going to come back to these people that live here.
Well, the bulkheads and roadways are a government responsibility. And we had bulkheads here, and you know, they're kind of worn out now, and they've got to be repaired or replaced. In terms of giving back, I mean, I think I'm giving back. I mean, I bought this land a long time ago, been paying taxes on it for a long time. It's kind of like my life's work now to see the land be used in a way that benefits the city of Kingston. I'm sure I'm not going to make any money on this project. I'm going to lose money, which is okay because, you know, my family is provided for and my needs are simple. If there's anybody who thinks they can do a better job of this, I'm happy to open my books and records to them and sell them everything I own for exactly what I've got in it, or maybe a little less. If anybody wants to put together a consortium, or the city of Kingston, or if somebody else who thinks they can do a better job, and if they get an endorsement from the community, I'm happy to step out of it and let somebody else, you know, maybe they can do it better than me, you know, and there's a lot of smarter guys than I am. But in terms of giving back, I'm giving back every day. I pay $200,000 a year in taxes to the city. I've given the city more than, well, given them a lot of paid a lot of taxes over the years, and I've spent a lot of money on the properties after I bought it, and it costs money to own the properties. And I'm trying to create a framework where end users can come in, particularly along the waterfront, and do some really neat things with that waterfront that would benefit everybody. That's how I'm giving back.
I mentioned
Well, I
the
think
public
her-
access.
I think her question was, is there going to be affordable housing in any part of your plan?
Affordable housing is one of the things that's under discussion, but certainly the idea of rich hoity-toity housing for the, the lucky few is not part of my life plan. I mean, I own a fair amount of real estate in downtown Brooklyn, and, the people that live in my apartments aren't rich people. They're people are making their way in life. I don't have any luxury housing. I don't live in luxury housing, and I don't have any luxury rental housing. So I think that the idea here is that you can put together a good mix where the bulkheads and the conceptual framework will drive end users that can create things that have a human scale to them. And I'm all about human scale. Please.
Hi, sorry. Robert Iannucci, hello.
Hi.
I'm Amberly Campbell, Lee Richards, or you can call us Jane Bondage and
Wreck-It Raccoon.
we are here representing the Mid-Hudson Misfits roller derby team. And thank you, appreciate it. Yes.
The Mid-Hudson Misfits?
Misfits, yep, roller derby team.
That's gotta be cool.
Thanks, it's so cool, thank you. We preach the derby gospel.
We would
Yes.
like to bring that coolness to the Kingston community.
Right.
I realize that one of my mottos is that normal people are boring.
Thank you. Well, we are visionaries as well. And when we saw this, we were amazed. And our vision is to not have a part-time roller rink / ice rink, but to have a full-time roller rink with us, the Mid-Hudson Misfits roller derby team, as your home team.
The sir over here, pardon, I forgot your name. You brought up wanting to blend, old with modern. And what better way than to roller skate? Because, I'm sure a lot of you do remember seeing roller derby on TV, and it was essentially staged combat with, these essentially lucha libre personas, elbows throwing. Now we are...
It's a legit sport. It's
very
actually
much is.
the fastest growing sport in the world. We've had 3 World Cups. The USA has won all 3. We've been around since 2012. We're not for profit. Every bout we do, we give back to a different charity.
Local charity.
Local charity, thank you. And we have the Mid-Hudson Mischiefs junior roller derby team, co-ed for ages 9 to 17. And both with lots of members, and we do really well, and we would bring not only revenue and visibility to you, but it would be great for us, because right now we're skating at Skate Time 209 in Accord. It is up for sale, and we'd like to move
Happy to
into...
talk to you more about this. Where does the name Misfits come from?
Yes, sorry?
How does that fit into your...
Well, because we accept everyone from all walks of life. On our team currently, we have a publisher of a paper, we have an engineer, we have a few social workers. I work in an office, and we have different shapes, different sizes, different ages. We actually had 3 members of our team turn 50 this year. So, exactly.
Yeah, and they're great.
And so, no matter what, no matter who you are, where you come from, what you've done, save a few felons, we will accept you, and that is our brand of the Misfits. We are anything but cookie cutter, and we love everyone. We are a big, big family.
One of the major things I've done in my life is run a historic motorcycle racing team. I'm one of the founders of the sport of historic motorcycle racing, and I have a very serious collection of historic racing motorcycles. And I've had many of the famous world champions ride for me. And one of my riders is Michelle Duff. Michelle Duff used to be Mike Duff. I accept everybody too.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Yes. Very good. So,
We'll talk more about this.
awesome.
Sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
Quick question, I didn't get a sense of what the timeline was for everything, and I'm wondering if you could give a little.
Better than what it used to be, because now we're actually making progress on the bulkheads and on other things that are related to those. So for the first time in a long time, I can actually see some light at the end of the tunnel, but I can't give you any better information than that. Mr. Shabbat, maybe you could tell us.
About the bulkhead timeline. I don't know that we have a timeline. The first section is already, we already have the contractor. I just heard the other day, they've accepted the bid for the second phase. The city has been working hard to get some grants, but as Rob said, it's really expensive. I mean, bulkheads, steel bulkheads are extremely expensive. We have under discussion other forms of bulkheads too. That will be cheaper, perhaps not as effective as we like. It's under discussion, and you know, the bottom line is always going to come down to money, what we can afford, how much we can get. You know, so.
Was Central Hudson doing some bulkhead work though on their parcel?
And
or no, Central Hudson.
Central Hudson did put in some.
They were paying for their own.
They paid for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we paid for it.
Well, yes and no. Say your rates.
Yeah, it was one.
This gentleman
He's had his hand up for
No. The timeline of the bulkheads, and also, I know that some people maybe misunderstood that the bulkheads, they're not doing this for him. If this project wasn't happening, the bulkhead still had to happen. So it's not like it's, what are you going to do as a result of you getting the bulkhead? The bulkheads need to happen regardless of whether the property is developed or not.
And I don't want to start going backwards in the conversation, but somebody brought up the flooding. And these bulkheads they're not going to stop flooding. They're going to hold back the water. But if we get storms like we had, all bets are off. The only thing you can do is put up a 25-foot bulkhead to do that, and that's going to defeat the whole purpose.
Right, this is about stopping erosion for the most part.
Right.
You're not going to stop the flooding.
Right. It's going to keep the land intact. That's what it does. But it's going to enhance the property. It's going to make it look better. You know, perhaps further development down the line. If the shoreline is stable, you know, other things can happen. But I don't think we actually have a timeline. As opposed, how far are we down? We're down, I don't even know how many feet we are from the bridge. You know,
1,200 feet.
1,200 feet is all.
It's about 100 feet in that direction from where we're sitting now.
Oh, yeah.
So is there anyone who has a question or a comment who hasn't already been called upon? That'd be you.
My name is Paige. We live at 214 East Union Street, so we're actually directly across the street from where the roller rink would be. Which
Yeah, thanks.
we're actually really not excited about.
I'm sorry.
I think that I really hope that the next meeting is a little bit less tone deaf in terms of like the neighborhood and what the community needs are. I think that some things that I'm worried about is green space. That's 4 acres right there. Archaeological site. The building on the corner is a historic building. And one thing also that I think is a point to be made is that the state of that yard and that building on the corner, it has not been taken care of. And that doesn't really speak well to like a property owner, and you know, having this big project is great, but to keep up a property that already exists in the community, I think is also important.
I'd like to respond very pointedly to that. The building that you're talking about, which is a white building on the corner of Tompkins and East Strand, is doomed. And the reason it's doomed is because the elevation that may have once been there with regard to the water has long since obsoleted that building. The ground floor of that building floods if 3 drops of water fall from the sky. And the tenants that are in there are people who are willing to put up with very, very frequent flooding, and there is no way to stop it. And it's not a situation where you could raise the floor because it's only got 9-foot ceilings in it. So if you want to raise the floor by 2 feet so it doesn't flood as frequently, then you're going to have a 7-foot ceiling, which means it's kind of like below permissible heights. The building has been obsoleted by whatever settling took place in the ground, whatever increase in water level. There's no way of really salvaging the building.
Right.
I like the building. I like historical things. That building is built out of Rossendale concrete. It was the first built, I think it was the first cast concrete Rossendale material building that was built in the state of New York. And if there was a good way to save it, I'd be the first guy to do it, and I would incorporate it into a larger structure. I don't see any way to save it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I mean, sorry, beyond it's really the saving it is that it would be great if it could be saved as a historic building, I understand that. But I was also talking about just the state of the building now. And the fact that it hasn't really been taken care of, even though there are people living in it. And just to move away from that, I think a really important question I have is, I looked at the blueprints that you had after the meeting, and there are no elevations. And as I'm someone who lives at 214, I'm really worried about how tall the building is going to be next to our building and the other buildings that are, you know, presumably across the street. And I know that it does dive down and that will be right there, but also what are we going to be looking at? Is it going to block the site and losing that green space?
These are conceptual drawings only. There are no elevations established yet.
Okay.
And, you know, those are tasks for the future, and there's certainly, I'm sure that they will be addressed in an intelligent. Excuse me, the person who's leaving, I don't know your name. I would like to know your name. You had a lot of good comments.
I have more.
Please, just tell us your name. Tell me your name.
I'll just give you my card.
Please. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll be back to you in a second. Thank you very much. You were saying?
Green space, I guess I'll just say like a few of the things that I'm concerned with is green space, it being an archaeological site. I think that that's something that someone should definitely look into. The elevation, I know you don't have those plans yet, but maybe a timeline with when we can see those plans.
I don't even have a timeline for the waterfront, for the bulkhead, and everything revolves around that.
Okay.
But look, we're at an early stage here. We're at a conceptual stage. We're at an outreach stage. All of these things are going to happen, and certainly that the people in the community are going to have multiple opportunities to weigh in on these things. And it's not just a matter of being critical. You know, we want some participation too, and we don't want the participation only at the end. Madame.
My name is Lisa, and I live in the neighborhood. I just wanted to follow up on some of the questions that Emily asked regarding energy and energy efficiency and the sustainable development of the project itself. And I just wanted to offer that in the village or town of New Paltz, there is a new construction. It's going to be starting in the next couple of years, but it is a mixed-use housing plus retail space for many different units. Right along the main road, and they're striving for a net zero energy building. And just in terms of this being in the visionary stage, one opportunity you have is to pursue net zero building certification for this site.
I don't have any comment to that. You're way above my pay grade.
Well, that is if there's engineers in the room or architects.
We're getting to the point where we're starting to lose people. It's 8 o'clock now. Steve, do you have anything further you want to say?
No, I think everybody said, I think everybody's had their fill, but this is going, obviously, it's going to be an ongoing conversation as we move along. And as I said before, I think things are going to change drastically as time goes on. Without a doubt, things are going to change. There's going to be environmental studies. There's going to be all kinds of things. So, yeah, I think this is a good first step to get everybody involved, and hopefully as we move along, we'll do the same thing periodically.
I'm going to take one last question from the gentleman on the right there.
I just want to thank you for having an open forum and inviting the public to give feedback. But I do hope that you heard from the audience that a working group is very important with this community, because right now, putting aside the bulkhead and the waterfront and the mixed development, basically we're talking about this building that wants to be built in a residential area. And it's very important for you to listen carefully and to work in good faith with the community about how that building will be developed so that it actually matches the historic character of the houses that are right next to it on those streets. Those residents live here just like you do. They have certain expectations about the quality of life that they would like to have. They're not against the development, but right now the cachet of mixed use basically is for industrial or other use. It's not talking about the residential part of that. And that's where I hope you will have an open mind and be flexible in trying to work with the community. If you decide that this is the site that you want and you're not going to change it, that those 60 families that live around that building that's going to be built on 4 acres, those fates are in your hands. So we're hoping that you will allow a working group to work with you as to how to improve your vision and concept while preserving the idea of developing the waterfront.
This is not some process that I would grudgingly enter into. I'm here because I know that there are good things that are going to happen from this meeting, from the other meetings, and Ann and some other people are going to be putting together one or more groups. It's not something that I enter into grudgingly. I understand your concept completely. I own 5 pieces of land in Pankaki. Every one of those is of a concern to me because ultimately they will have some nice structures on them, and I want them to be as blessed as everybody else will be blessed in Pankaki. And it's my objective so that when the ultimate plans are done for this property, that it's a property that everybody will feel comfortable with, and I'll do the best that I can to make that happen and involve the community. I can't give you any more than that.
So I'll just say before you guys all leave, I am willing to sort of spearhead the coordination of community input. I certainly don't mean to be the only one, I don't sort of want to speak out of turn, but if you guys are interested in that, if everybody who would be interested in that wants to give me their contact info, I'll start to put that together and make sure that whatever information, goes out to everybody, and we'll work out those groups and figure out, if there's different specialties and, figure it out, basically. We've been through it, for multiple projects, and so, the drill.
I thank everybody for coming. It's been a great group. It's been a great experience.
Sorry.